This week, it's off, it's on, it's off, maybe. Who knows? The coalition is in a mess, and we'll try to help you make sense of it all. Friend of the show and former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman joins me soon. But we put some focus on the stories that really matter and impact you first, because while the right is in turmoil, the left are running wild, and they're the ones who are in power at the moment. We'll bring you an update on Labor's bizarre plans to tax the gains you get on investments you haven't sold yet. We'll explain why this is going to be a disaster for everyone, not just the wealthy. Interest rates have come down a bit, but is it a good sign? Maybe not, says one expert. And some very concerning new scientific data about COVID and fertility rates that you need to know about. Settle in for a big one. G'day Fremantle, g'day Darwin and g'day Maitland. Our thoughts are with everyone in the Hunter and New South Wales mid-north coast right now. This is episode 412 of The Other Side. For the week commencing Friday, May 23, 2025, I'm Damien Curry. The Other Side is your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. Our bias, we always declare it right up front, is sensible centre-right. We explore ideas from the conservative right to classical liberalism to libertarianism, filling the void left by the ABC and the mainstream media. And we definitely do not expect you to agree with everything that's said on this program, because many different things are said. And most importantly, we pay our own way with your voluntary support via our website, othersidetv.com.au. A new show drops every Friday night at 7 p.m, and clips from that Friday night show drop throughout the week, most nights at around 7. Well, don't say we didn't warn you, Australia. The new formation of the Australian Senate gives Labor and the Greens the combined power to pass any laws they like without needing to get any independents or minor party senators on board. New laws in our country have to pass the lower house, the House of Representatives, and Labor now has a sweeping majority in that chamber with 93 of the 150 seats. The coalition only have 43 seats, Libs 28 and Nats 15, and 12 for the others, mainly Teals and one Green in there. So no problem for Labor doing whatever they want in the lower house. And in the upper house, the Senate, Labor is likely to finish with 28 Senate seats out of the 76 seats available, with the Greens on 11. That makes a total of 39 and a majority for the two left-wing parties. So god-awful laws will abound, and the Greens have extraordinary power now to demand whatever they want. So bravo, Australia, bravo. The first of the horror bad laws will be the passage of Treasurer Jim Chalmers' very socialist new tax reforms, imposing a doubling of the tax on superannuation of thousands of Australians who have more than 3 million in their accounts. The basic tax rate will jump from 15 to 30% on the bit over 3 million. Never mind that was not the deal when the money was put in. Oops, sorry, we're the government and we'll just change the rules whenever we bloody well like. Stuff you. And just when you thought it won't affect me, the Greens have demanded Labor lower that threshold to 2 million. You know, make the tax fairer. Now, if you're under 30 and you're still thinking, oh, that'll just affect rich boomers, I won't get to 2 million, I got news for you. They're not indexing the threshold to inflation. And so by the time you retire, oh yeah, you'll be paying it, kids. Well done with all that left-wing voting against your own self-interest you under 30s so love to do. Australia's largest retailer, Gerry Harvey, branded the reforms as stupidity of the highest order. But of course, this is all much worse than it seems, because they won't just be taxing the income that people earn in any given year. The most purely evil intrusion on your freedom and liberty is coming. Albo and Jimbo Chalmers are planning to introduce Australia's first ever capital gains tax on unrealised gains. So what does that mean? What is an unrealised capital gains tax? It means that if you own an investment, like a house or shares, and that investment goes up in value in a year from, say, $700,000 to $800,000, then you would have to pay tax on that $100,000 gain as if you had received it as income in that year, even if you haven't sold it. As we said on the show last week, it's like taxing pixie dust. 99% of commenters on our show this week agreed that this is awful. But a few dopes still think it's a great idea. It'll only be applying to people who have more than $3 million in their superannuation, they say. So you're just taxing the rich bastards. And these people are missing the point. Big time. They're missing 3 points, actually. Point 1, the very idea of taxing unrealised gains is so stupid and so immoral that it's never been applied anywhere in the world. We open the door to this monster and there'll be more to come. You can be certain of that. Taxing gains not yet realised forces people to pay without having sold anything, which in many cases means that they won't be able to afford to pay. So then they're forced to sell the asset. Also, the value of assets go up and down, Jimmy boy. So the gains might not be permanent. How's that going to be catered for by the government? And it's hard also to get accurate valuations. Albo is going to be guesstimating what your assets are worth and taxing you on his fictional numbers. And the cost of enforcement and compliance will be huge. Point 2, they want this to apply to people with a super balance over $3 million only. The Greens want that lowered to $2 million. And they'll probably get their way because, as we just explained, they now can. This has lots of people thinking it won't affect them, just the rich bastards, but it's not indexed, as we said, and in 10 to 20 years, younger middle-class Aussies will likely have 2 to 3 million in super, so it'll eventually affect the average person. And point 3, the knuckleheads who think this good idea are missing right now, is that it will right now affect everyone. It will immediately be payable by 80,000 Australians. That's not a small number, and these people are the people who pay the most income tax, remember. Let that sink in for a minute. These are the people who pay the tax in this country. Here's some statistics to always remember. The top 1% of income earners in Australia, those people that the left love to call the evil 1% bastards, those people pay 18% of all the income tax paid in this country. The top 3% pay 28%, and the top 10% pay almost half all the income tax paid. The bottom 50% of income earners pay only 11% of all the tax paid. High-income individuals play a massive role in funding government services and programs. That's how our system is already fair. The people who make more already pay the vast majority of the tax. But there's a limit to what these best and brightest among us are going to put up with. If left-wing Aussies want to keep on slamming the high-income earners and calling them rich bastards and not recognising that, but for just a few exceptions, the vast majority of them have made decisions and worked their asses off and taken huge risks and set up small businesses and slogged away at them for years, then get ready. There's going to be hell to pay because these people are going to take their money and leave. And the smart, hard-working Gen Y and Gen Zs who aren't entitled brats, the ones who watch this show who are now making sacrifices for their future, they're going to down tools and give up or leave Australia too. And there's going to be nobody left for the lefty Australians to tax to death and bludge off. Now, you can call me a right-winger and a boomer, as Friendly Geordies did a couple of weeks ago. All the names under the sun, if that makes you feel better. I'm Gen X, by the way. But what I'm talking about here is natural law. It is human nature. And it isn't going to change because of what some university-educated lefty Aussie thinks or wants to pretend is the way the world should be. You simply won't achieve the end you're trying to achieve, not even with any threats of jail or use of guns and police, as the left so like to do when they're in power. You won't bring down inflation. You won't bring down interest rates. You won't make housing more affordable. You won't increase welfare. You'll wreck social services, Medicare and the NDIS, and you'll ultimately wreck Australia. And you know what? Non-left Australia isn't going to let that happen without a fight. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about an intellectual and political and cultural fight, the likes of which you have never seen. A fight that will have Jimbo Chalmers and Albo and the brain-dead commies who inhabit the Greens regretting the day they ever heard the term unrealised capital gains. Joining me in the studio now is former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Campbell, unrealised capital gains, what's your view on all of this?
Well, it's an absolute shocker, Damien, as you've just said in your opening editorial. And we should explore that. And perhaps to convince people who need a bit of convincing, even though they might be viewers of the show, it's like this. If a newly elected Labor government want to increase the taxes on superannuation, even though, by the way, I see that as a broken promise from some years ago not to fiddle with it, but if they want to do that, then I sort of get that. And so if they want to, say, take the 15% tax on contributions and earnings going to super, and they want to put that up to, say, 20% or 25%, well, fine, go and do that.
Wasn't the deal.
It wasn't the deal, but go ahead. I can sort of suck that one up and deal with it. What I can't deal with is a fundamental change to the way that we levy tax in this country, and that's this unrealised gains thing. As you've explained, it's about saying we don't care about the principles that have governed our tax system for 100 years, let's say, maybe even longer. We're going to throw that out the window. We're going to say, well, we're going to tax you on money you actually haven't got in the hand. And so,
it's never been done.
It's never
in most places in the world.
It's not, and in fact, it was being proposed in the United States, and the Democrats ran away. There were one or two leaders in the Democrats who were thinking about doing this, and basically the Democratic Party just went, no way are we doing this. I mean, it is crazy, and there's a range of people coming out across this country who've been quite vocal. I believe Paul Keating said it's a bad idea. The famous public servant, Mr. Henry, has come out in recent days saying, this is just not on, it's bad policy. Former governor of the Reserve Bank, has also said that, I think, today. You mentioned Jerry Harvey. There's a range of people talking about this because it's just going to be really bad for the country in ways that we need to explore. But let's now explore what it means to innovation in this country, for example.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the precedent sets, it's the message it sends.
It's like
people,
this.
Right?
Well, okay, so my wife and I have been investors in small technology companies, startup technology companies, through our involvement in the Brisbane Angels over the last decade since I left politics. Mm-hmm. So we have probably put, in aggregate, from our super fund, over $100,000 over the years into micro investments into lots of small companies.
Yep.
And guess what? Most of them have gone bust.
Right.
But before they've gone bust, they've apparently gone up in value. So what happens is on day one, you get this pitch like Shark Tank, and you get told the great story, and so you say, I'll put $8,000 into that. Yeah. So you put $8,000 on the table, and then a year later they come back and they say, we're doing really, really well, we're building customers, it's going well, do you want to buy more shares? By the way, it's been revalued, and now those shares that you bought for $8,000, they'd be worth $20,000, okay?
Yep.
And so the buy-in now is higher. So you might choose to buy and you might not. But the point is, there's now a new valuation of those shares. They've gone up by $12,000. So you're going to be paying tax on that. You have to report that to the ATO. And guess what? They then go bust. And so you've got nothing, but you've paid tax. Now, I can tell you now, and I say this to the politicians like Jim Chalmers and our Prime Minister who think this is a good idea, I will never, ever, ever invest through my super fund in speculative startup tech companies, usually with young entrepreneurs,
which is
ever again. Yeah. Now, that's being said right across Australia right now by people who invest in tech, who invest in young entrepreneurs. Yeah. They will not invest. So a whole lot of money is pulled out of the system because people don't want to be taxed on stuff that may or may not make it.
Yeah, and that's a tragedy.
I mean, it's and by the way,
do you think they're going to get away with it? I mean,
well, at the moment they're hell bent. Jim Chalmers is so arrogant, actually. Like this guy comes on TV and he smiles. He's always got this cheesy smile, and it's always great. Even but the point is, he's one of the most dangerous people in the federal parliament because he has this capacity to basically BS underwater with a sack of cement tied around his legs. He could go on and on forever. And the point is about this, he's not for changing. That's very clearly. And so people are going to have to really, in the next 4 weeks, really get loud about this.
Well, don't go away. We're going to get into talking about the coalition in a moment. A quick note on the interest rate cut this week too, by the way. The Brisbane-based political and economic think tank, the Australian Institute for Progress, says that the 0.25% cut to 3.85% for the base cash rate is not necessarily a positive sign for the economy. The AIP's Executive Director, Graham Young, says that if you look at the historical interest rate, a rate of between 4 and 5% is what's considered neutral, and anything outside that range is not a good sign economically. And 3.85% means that the Reserve Bank thinks the economy is heading for trouble and needs a little stimulus. Graham says it's not so much a vote of confidence in government policy, but a warning that there's a potential for a downturn. He says the uber low rates that we saw between 2010 and 2020 were an historical aberration, and there's no way that the bank should go back there. Those very low rates were responsible for a blowout in the cost of housing, and they also drastically undervalued cash as an asset, which was a bit of a nightmare for older Aussies who depended on fixed interest for their income. The solution to home affordability is more supply and competition in the housing market, not lower interest rates, Graham Young says. But unfortunately, no government, state or federal, has a comprehensive set of policies that's going to create that supply. You may have noticed if you've been overseas on holiday recently that you can log into your streaming services like Netflix or Prime in other countries, but the shows they offer are different and sometimes even better. You're paying good money for those subscription services. Why can't you watch? Well, with a virtual private network or VPN, you can log in from home here in Australia with an internet address from anywhere in the world, and big corporations and big government can't see where you are. Now, to be clear, criminals can still be actively found with police warrants, of course, but the average honest citizen will have their location protected from prying eyes of corporate marketers and government bureaucrats. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they are the best VPN service out there. That's private internet access. As a viewer of the other side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/otherside. That's piavpn.com/otherside. It's a great service and a rock bottom price, and you're helping keep the other side going and growing. So the coalition has split and then paused it all and considered getting back together. And by the time you're watching this, who knows where they'll be exactly. I'll be joined by somebody who knows a thing or two about the coalition, former Liberal National Party Queensland Premier and Brisbane Lord Mayor Campbell Newman, in a moment. But before we get into giving you all our genius opinions, like the mainstream media do, we always try to go back to the horse's mouth on this show first. So let's listen to what the National Party leader, David Littleproud, actually said when he announced the original separation on Tuesday.
Since the devastating defeat and my re-election as leader of the National Party and Susan Lee, the leader of the Liberal Party, we have set out on a journey of trying to reshape a coalition agreement. Now, I want to make it clear from the start and the outset, we've done that at the pace of Susan Lee, taking into account and respecting the personal circumstances that she's found herself in. This morning, after the discussions that both Susan Lee and I have had over the ensuing period, our party room has got to a position where we will not be re-entering a coalition agreement with the Liberal Party after this election. What we have got to a position is that the National Party will sit alone on a principled basis, on the basis of looking forward, not having to look back and to try and actually regain important policy pieces that change the lives of the people we represent. It's on a principled position of making sure that those hard-fought wins are maintained and respected, and we continue to look forward. We look forward to what else we can do as a party and as part of an opposition now that can shape the lives of regional Australians for the better.
Okay, so what he seems to be saying there is that the Nationals don't want to have to fight all over again to gain the Liberals' support for a whole bunch of policies that they'd already fought to have adopted. There's 4 policy positions that the Nats don't want to have to get the support on all over again from the Libs. The first is a commitment to nuclear power. The second is a commitment to the Regional Australia Fund, a $20 billion investment fund that's going to support the regions. Number 3, taking on the supermarkets over the pressure that they put on farmers. And number 4, a guarantee for basic tech infrastructure services to be provided for the bush. Nothing new there.
And what we are saying is that what we secured in the former coalition are policies that should remain. We don't want to have to look back and to waste energy on trying to re-prosecute the case. We should be continuing to look forward. And so I had a respectful conversation with Susan Lee this morning and sat down, made it very clear that we remain committed to having the door open, respecting the position that Susan's been put in. That she is a leader that needs to rebuild the Liberal Party. They are going on a journey of rediscovery, and this will provide them the opportunity to do that without the spectre of the National Party imposing their will, but setting clear boundaries and parameters about what's important to us, about what we achieved as a coalition in the last 3 years.
David Littleproud there on Tuesday morning explaining why the National Party wanted to leave the coalition. Liberal Party leader Susan Lee responded by repeating her Modern Australia messaging we spoke about last week. Remember, Modern Australia means progressive Australia, inner city Australia.
The Liberal Party must respect modern Australia, reflect modern Australia, and represent modern Australia. And Australians sent us a clear message at the last election, and we are listening. We will take the time to get this right. We'll listen, we'll step up, we'll modernise, and we will rebuild. And it is with that undertaking from my party room and with my conviction and determination to get it right with respect to policies that I had front and centre with my conversations with David. And while I have enormous respect for David and his team, it is disappointing that the National Party has decided today to leave the coalition. But the most important thing I want to say is this. The Nationals' door remains open and our door remains open. And we look forward with optimism to rejoining at some point in the future.
Now, lots of commentators this week said the Nationals leaving the coalition was a kind of stunt, a Trump-style negotiation tactic of making a bold, extreme move to shock the other party into action. If so, maybe it's worked. Other commentators say Littleproud's move was just a silly tantrum and he was forced to backtrack when some of his MPs and big donors freaked out. I think that analysis is a bit weak, frankly. Anyway, under the coalition agreement, the Nationals and Liberals formed the opposition shadow cabinet. That's what they call the front bench, the shadow ministry, the MPs who sit on the front bench behind the opposition leaders and who each have the responsibility of shadowing a ministerial portfolio. That coalition shadow front bench was due to be decided on Thursday. This put an unrealistic and some say an unnecessarily short timeline on any decisions to be made about the future of the coalition. It sort of forced the Nationals to accept that all the policies of the past were now up for reconsideration, something they clearly didn't want to be rushed into. I mean, the Labor Party never announced their new leader or their new shadow ministry right after losing an election. They always take a few weeks to get things sorted. Parliament doesn't sit again until July, so you don't need a shadow cabinet to be worked out until then. So why was Susan Lee pushing it so hard? After announcing the split Tuesday, David Littleproud had put together his own National Party-only kind of unofficial shadow cabinet, giving portfolios to his party members to be spokespeople for in the next parliament. Both parties were going to announce their shadow cabinets Thursday, and then Lee and Littleproud had an 11th hour meeting at Parliament House Thursday morning, and before we knew it, Littleproud and National Senator Bridget Menzies were facing the media again. Here's how 9 News saw that.
Well, look, this morning I had the privilege to bring together the shadow spokespeople of the National Party into the next Parliament. And we had a very productive meeting about planning the way forward for the National Party in being another opposition party in this next Parliament. During that period, I had a brief meeting with Susan Lee. And she made an offer to reconvene her party room to discuss the 4 policy areas that the National Party demand as part of a coalition agreement, and I thank her for that. And as a consequence, I have decided to send those spokespeople home as a sign of good faith. And Susan, as a sign of good faith, will not be announcing Shadow Cabinet. This is a positive step forward, one in which we've always said we'd be productive and constructive. And I think the Nationals have acted in good faith, and as a consequence, sending those shadow spokesmen home, I'm proud to say that we'll allow this process to take place and for the Liberal Party to convene at whatever period is for them and convenient for them. And I think that is the way forward in a mature and sensible way. And I'm proud of the fact that our guys are prepared to accept that in being sent home today, despite the fact that I was about to announce to you all this afternoon our shadow spokesman, because I think this is a far more important development and one that I've always said that I'd be constructive moving forward on.
So you're getting back together?
Hold on, absolutely.
So you're getting back together?
No, this will allow time for a process for Susan Lee to call her party room together to discuss those 4 policy areas that the National Party could not allow to be passed away on. They were hard-fought wins.
All right, well, joining me now in the studio is Campbell Newman, former Queensland Premier. Campbell, it's on again, it's off again, it's on. You know, what is going on here? This is a bit of a shambles.
Well, who knows really what's happened. One thing that I think you haven't mentioned is also there's this suggestion that one of the things that Little Proud was also after was the ability for Nats in the shadow cabinet, if they were together, to be able to sort of, not observe cabinet, the shadow cabinet solidarity, which, if that was the case, I don't think Susan Lee could reasonably, accept that in any circumstances. But, so there was an interesting thing on the 7:30 report in the last few nights where it was said that this hat she had was somewhere in writing. That might have generated this sort of little interview you just played, where some commentators are painting that as a bit of a back down. I just go back to the 4 things. Why not? Why can't the Liberals support nuclear energy? The silly thing about the campaign just fought was that it was going to be funded by the private sector. They never had to say that. It was just repeal the ban. So the Libs should be able to get on board with nuclear energy. They should be able to get on board with regional mobile phone services.
Yes.
They should be able to get on board with a regional fund. I mean, as a former Queensland Premier, of course we were trying to do as much as we could to look after regional Queensland. The supermarket thing one, well, there is a bit of a case that these firms are behaving badly, Coles and Woolies, and so I think it's not the sort of thing I particularly would like to see as going in position. But I don't
Coles
think
and Woolies one is weird because they're not price gouging on the consumer because they're not making an enormous profit, but they are screwing down the suppliers.
Well, they are, and
that's part of their job, right? To keep the prices low.
Well, they do, and they do things like they do land banking where they keep other players, smaller players, the IGAs, for example, out of this world. Aldi's, they'll sit on the prime site.
Real estate,
they do stuff like that, and they've significant market power. So, I mean, I don't think it's something that should be dismissed at all by the Liberal Party. I think it should be well and truly on the table. So I don't know why that Susan Lee had to say, all policies are null and void and whatever. I mean, that's a provocative unilateral statement in itself if you think about it.
Yeah,
if you've been in coalition, you've just lost an election, to then say, well, none of that's...
Everything's off the table.
Everything's off the table.
Start again. Just looking at the party totals, if we can pull that up, John, I mean, I think we've got the National Party are only on 3.8% of the vote. I mean, One Nation have got 6.4%, and the LNP and the Liberal Party are on 27.8%.
Well, you've got to sort of throw the Liberal National Party in there as well.
Yeah, so 27.8 for the total there, and then the Nationals 3.8, and then One Nation 6.4. They are bleeding out the right side.
They're bleeding out the right. So and that's
more than the left. So why this shift to the left with these leaders?
This is why Susan Lee, again, with the way she's positioning, really worries me. The problem is on the right. It's not on. The problem is that the party has gone in the election campaign that was just fought. It was not a right-wing conservative push. There are a couple of elements I'd give you that maybe it could be construed that way, but in the main, it was not. It was very muted, and basically it was incoherent. There needs to be. Here are the principles of the Liberal Party and the National Party.
Yep.
Here this translates into a clear vision. This is what we want to do for Australia. That then translates into a a platform and a plan. This is our plan for Australia. And into that plugs a series of announceables and messages, policies that they can announce and programs, initiatives.
It's all aligned. Everybody's bought into it.
It all plugs together. And when the community start to hear it, or that flyer gets in the letterbox, it actually makes sense. It's not just we'll match this or we will throw money at that. So going back to
comms was terrible.
The comms was terrible.
Can't be good if the strategy's not there.
Exactly,
The strategy
because it doesn't. It's incoherent. But back to this thing. So what's happened? The fragmentation was to the right. So I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. We actually didn't do nearly as well as we should have, but it went to us. It went to One Nation. It went to Family First. It went to Trumpet of Patriots. Yeah. So
11.7%.
They've bled out like that.
Okay, back in a moment.
You're watching The Other Side with Damien Coorey, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
Well, if you've been watching this show since the election, it'll be no surprise to you that I believe that the Liberal and National Party coalition was or is not a nice, happy, unified, broad church of different but compatible ideas and policies, as John Howard used to like to say. It was or is, in my view, a divided into Frankenstein party, and that is why they lost. A lot of people disagree with me on that, including our two guests that we'll be talking to in a moment, but it's not perfectly divided along country versus city lines or Nationals versus Liberals, but it generally is. The real division, though, is two very different and distinct market segments, two groups. The centre-left to centre so-called moderates and the centre-right to right so-called conservatives. And as I argued in episode 410 2 weeks ago after the election disaster, in 2025 modern Australia, I think these are completely incompatible groups. This is a delicious carton of chocolate milk, great for an energy and protein boost. And this is a nice kombucha drink with great health benefits. This one is preferred by rugged working class Australians, tradies, farmers, people who live on the land or in the suburbs, the real people who make the country tick, the engine of Australia. And yes, more men than women do prefer that. And this product is preferred by inner city types, people who have sedentary jobs and don't want too much sugar in their diets and who don't need as much protein as dairy provides. They're hardworking too, but they have to spend most of their day using their brains while sitting at laptops. They're knowledge workers and they want good gut health to keep their brains working. And yes, more women than men will go for the kombucha. So both are good products and have their own market niche to fill. The centre right-wing political parties do need to fight the Teals for the inner city seats and appeal to centre left-leaning university-educated women and immigrants. But they can't do that if they also want to win over the centre right-leaning working class people and classical liberal small business people and libertarians and conservatives in regional and rural Australia. Not to mention conservative and libertarian immigrants who hate big government control and who came here to escape that in their homelands. The coalition keeps losing time and time and time again because they're trying to sell an unsellable Frankenstein product. Peter Dutton, trying to look soft and flexible, just ends up looking weak and unfocused. Look what happens when I do this. Cheers. Oh, God. These two products, ladies and gentlemen, are different and they do not belong in the same glass. They are incompatible. They are not two products in the same category filling some kind of broad church of products. They are just simply not similar enough to be mixed without becoming far less than the sum of their parts and therefore unmarketable and unsellable. Okay, apologies for the cute analogy, but you get the point. Now, as I said, the two products don't neatly fit the Nationals and the Liberals. Both have their own Frankenstein problems inside their own party ranks. But if the two parties were to split, it would solve some of this problem. It's the sensible way to split things organisationally, and it would enable a kind of general alignment of the centre-right and right with the Nats and the centre-left and left with the Libs. This will mean they can publicly disagree on policy without damaging each other's brands. They can run candidates against each other in every seat and, God forbid, let you decide the outcome. They can swap preferences and they can form government in coalition later. The idea of a coalition in opposition is kind of weird anyway. This is one of those times that I firmly disagree with John Howard, who was all over the media decrying the Nationals' move on Tuesday night. And a current affair, we're happy to tell you what you're supposed to think right from the start of the interview, of course.
So, Mr. Howard, just when we thought it couldn't get any worse for Conservative politics, it does. What are they doing to the partnership that you are so proud of?
Well, I don't think it will last forever, but it's a stupid move. And it's better together. Again and again, we've demonstrated that our glory days are when we work together. So I would say to both the parties, remember that. And if you've got policy differences, which inevitably you have, resolve them.
Mr. Howard, I believe, is wrong. This is 2025. Australia is very different. Politics is split down the middle and much more polarised these days than it used to be. And this is not just about policy differences. It's cultural, it's values-based, it's contradictory positions on fundamental issues. In 2025, they're simply not better together. They're weaker together. The whole is not greater than the sum of its parts. It's less than the sum of its parts for all the reasons I described in my chocolate milk kombucha analogy. Joining me in the studio is former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman, and Freya Leach is joining us from the Menzies Research Centre online from Sydney. Freya, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Now, I get a feeling I'm going to get a bit of a lashing probably from both of you on this one. We'll start with you, Freya. Can the coalition survive with two very different groups within it, or would it be better to have a Conservative Party and a moderate Liberal Party as separate entities, do you think?
Well, I'm not so convinced that the difference is primarily between the two parties. I think there are also plenty of differences between Liberals within the Liberal Party and also Nationals within the National Party. And that's just at a federal level, not to mention the differences and idiosyncrasies between them at the state levels as well. So I'm not convinced that you could ever achieve something like a simple split as you propose. And so I really think the only way forward is for them to reunite together. The other factor is that voters won't vote for a divided group. It has, for better or worse, been cemented in the minds of voters that we are a coalition, and you can't just easily break that and then expect people to still vote for you. You'll look like the divided toddlers that can't get along. And so I think they have to come back together. I also think it'll be a terrible waste of resources running National Party and Liberal Party candidates in every electorate. And ultimately, there is more that unites both parties than divides them. And I think the core principles of smaller government, lower taxes, equal opportunity, like those are all universal values that both parties can get behind. I think they just need to, do the review of the last election, reevaluate policies, but then ultimately they have to come together because I don't see a realistic way forward for them as two separate parties. And then that's not even to mention what happens if you have national parties speaking out against Liberal policies and vice versa. It's just going to create this really shambolic political situation. And to be honest, it's going to be a massive gift to Labor.
Okay, there is that argument. Campbell, I know you're a coalitionist. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, look, I totally agree with Freya and I agree with John Howard, but I firstly take you back to what Robert Menzies said, I think in about 1944 it was, when they gathered in northern Victoria near Albury-Wodonga to actually form the Liberal Party. And he said at the time, there was some speech I remember reading where he said, look, we have been fighting from our respective parties for many years and we haven't worked together. And we need to basically what he was saying is we've got to come together to win elections, and that's what needs to happen. And the lesson of quite a few decades of here in Queensland of when, you had the Bjelke-Petersen National Party government, the Liberals there for a while, and then splitting and all the stuff that went on there. Then there was the years in the wilderness, with particularly when Peter Beattie sort of held supreme. And, you had these two warring parties fighting each other, and exactly as Freya said. And look, I'm not advocating, by the way, for an LNP writ large. I think you're right to the extent there are unique brand positioning differences, but they do have to. But the coalition is important. That coming together, working as a team, particularly to fight elections, critically important. And if you want to know
you guys have both put your case, and I think that's fair enough. And I like getting scolded occasionally. But I'm going to just clarify
nice to you,
my
mate.
argument. You were a bit nice. I'm going to much nicer than you were off air. But I want to make the distinction between what I'm not saying there's necessarily a split between the Liberals and the Nationals. What I'm arguing for is a split between that Australia needs a Conservative Party that's speaking to the outer suburbs of the cities, to the working class Conservatives, to country Australia, to regional Australia, to rural Australia. And then we need a party that can speak to the inner cities, because they're very different. I mean, I worked on an inner city campaign. Freya, I know you ran, didn't you, in Balmain, I think, wasn't it, for the state election in New South Wales? Campbell, you know all about it, what it's like running in cities versus country. The question is broader than, let's take it away from the coalition, whether it's a question of Liberal or National split. Do we need two separate products in the market that can go their own way and say...
we need leadership, and we need leadership and the right policies. And I'll defer to Freya very quickly here. But, okay, personal example, as the Liberal Lord Mayor in 2004 of Brisbane, we successfully won that first election, won big in 2008, and Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner, who's there today, that's 20 years of Liberal/LNP leadership in the city of Brisbane, and yet the city supposedly, slanted left wing these days. What's he doing right? What did I do right? What did Graham Quirk do right?
Well, what did you do?
Well, I think it's because it's about tailoring. It's about taking the principles of the party, which Freya just mentioned, and tailoring the policies and the programs to deal with that, and actually unashamedly being, slightly left wing in the interpretation of those. It's like, we were big in terms of trying to help deal with homelessness, for example, and we were very green in terms of greening the city and environmental policies and sustainability.
Okay, Freya, what's your take on it?
The reason the Liberal Party has been one of the most successful political parties in the Anglosphere in the last 200 years has been because we're the stewards of John Stuart Mill's liberalism and also Edmund Burke's conservatism. And that is at the heart of the party. It's those dual philosophies of liberalism and conservatism. And those two philosophies speak to the inner cities, but then also to outer suburban Australia. And when you can get the balance right between those, emphasizing different ones more in different areas depending on their values and priorities, that's when we succeed. That is Howard's broad church. But I think you're exactly right, Campbell. The problem at the last election was not we moved too left. It's not that we moved too right. It was that we didn't move anywhere at all. What was the vision? What was the narrative? What was the plan for Australia? Half our MPs couldn't even tell you what our policies were. How did we expect the public to do that? So that is the ultimate issue. It's a lack of vision and courageous, bold policy that is serious enough to meet the challenges confronting Australia. If we can get back to that, then we will be successful.
They just elected the wrong leaders. So Canavan would have been a superior choice for the Nationals. I can't see him doing what Littleproud's just done, which is just outrageous. And as for Susan Lee, I don't think she's up to the job. I wasn't particularly happy with the alternative too, but I think he'd have done a more workmanlike job, and I don't think this would have happened. Lack of leadership has just given us this debacle. Sorry.
All right. Well, Freya, go ahead. I'll give you the last word on this topic. What is it? What's your view on this? And Susan Lee, is she going to be strong enough, or is she classic sort of liberal left?
I think well, I really want her to succeed. Like, I think, and you've got to think as well, the optics, if she doesn't, are going to be a lot worse for us. There will be accusations that our, women problem is really bad and we've thrown her off the glass cliff, is what people will say. So I really hope that Susan succeeds, and I hope that she has good people around her advising her. But I think ultimately it's all about leadership, and it's about having a genuine vision for Australia and managing to reconcile Burke's conservatism with Mill's liberalism. And that's when we will be at our best. And so I don't think we should shy away from, having conservative views on social issues, nor should we shy away from being economically liberal. And it's about how you tailor your messaging in different areas. And I agree that migrants should be super pro-liberal because we're the patriotic party and they came to Australia for a reason. They're small business oriented, they're family focused. So there's a lot of opportunity for us still. But I think it all comes down to leadership and also credibility. Think of the last election. Ultimately, voters just didn't trust us to actually deliver on what we were promising. And so we have to reestablish that trust with Australians. Otherwise, it's really hard to see how this is going to end.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. We will come back in a moment with some different topics to discuss. Joining me today on the other side, former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman and Freya Leach from the Menzies Research Centre in Sydney. I want to tell you about a fantastic initiative that's happening out of Canberra right now. It's called the Awards for Men in Leadership. The awards are given out on International Men's Day, which is November 19. They're designed to combat the increasing denigration of masculinity in our culture and the widespread discrimination against males inside and outside the workplace. The goal is to lift the well-being of boys and men and facilitate healthy collaboration between men and women. The awards for men in leadership are designed to inspire men to make a bigger contribution to family and community and to elevate positive male role models. There's a $10,000 scholarship for studies and professional development, public recognition for the winners, and a year of mentorship and executive coaching for each recipient. It's targeted at young men and middle-aged guys who fought their way up from some other kind of disadvantage. This is the third year of the awards and it'll be the biggest yet. To find out more, just search up the Awards for Men in Leadership on Facebook.
The Other Side with Damien Coorey is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed and diving deep on the issues that matter most in around an hour. So you don't miss a thing. Subscribe now to our YouTube channel at Other Side Oz by clicking the button and the bell below the picture frame. And follow us on X now at Other Side Oz. That's AUS at Other Side Oz. It's free. This is The Other Side.
Well, those of you who've been watching The Other Side for a long time will know that my beef with COVID mismanagement has always been focused on the illegality and immorality of governments locking people in their homes against their will and restricting their movement across and within borders in our country without any justifiable good cause. I come from a science-loving, medically oriented family. I don't buy into the cliche that pharmaceutical companies are inherently evil. Big Pharma has done much to alleviate the suffering of billions of people. And I know very many good people who work in the industry and who are passionate about ethics. And this doesn't mean that there are no bad actors in the industry, though. But we are not and never have been anti-vaxxers or conspiracy theorists on this show. And it's in that context that I present this data from a study into women's fertility undertaken in the Czech Republic and highlighted by Dr. John Campbell on his popular YouTube channel this past week. This is serious stuff. The Czech Republic is one of the few places where this kind of data is actually available.
We are starting to hear some reports from various parts of the world about declining birth rates in certain countries and certain demographics. But what I want to look at today is where we have specific data, and that is data from the Czech Republic. And it's in this paper here. Now, I've actually been talking to Dr. Vibeke Manica about this, who's a friend of the channel, one of the leading medical researchers in Denmark, and she's put this paper together.
Dr. Campbell says this kind of data isn't available in the UK or the US, but it's available in the National Archive in the Czech Republic. Now, they count the number of successful pregnancies leading to healthy live births, and they map that against COVID vaccination status. And the results are not good.
And this is a study of 1.3 million women between the ages of 18 and 39. So it's not a sample, it's basically the whole population of that group of women. And basically Vibeke tells me that birth rate's about 30% lower in vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
I'm sorry, what? 30% lower?
Now, we do need to break this down a bit to make sense. Total fertility rate in the Czech Republic, 2021, 2022 and 2023. And all this data is given births per 1,000 women. 1.83 in 2021, 1.62 in 2022, 1.45 in 2023.
So what's causing this? We don't know. But there's one disturbing correlation that needs to be further investigated.
What we've got here is up here we've got the number of vaccinations, and we see that this did actually this leveled off. This is 2021 here, so this is 2021. This is 2022. So we see it leveled off in 2023. This is the important point here. The red line is all births. The blue line that we see up here, this is the number of successful conceptions resulting in live births in all women, in women that weren't vaccinated. So the red line is all women. The blue line is women that were not vaccinated, whereas the green line way below is women that were vaccinated. So we can see a huge difference.
Nursing educator and PhD Dr. John Campbell there. You can check out that video on his YouTube channel in full, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it on the show today. Australian centre-right think tank, the Menzies Research Centre, reported back in 2023 that we didn't get the leadership we should have during the COVID pandemic. Instead of leaders of unimpeachable quality, we had Dan Andrews and Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan, people who put politics before public good, in my humble opinion. In the UK, they had Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who in a series of WhatsApp messages between him and a journalist, it was revealed in 2023, was advised as early as February 2020 that the mortality rate of COVID was too low to justify taking shortcuts in vaccine safety trials. For a disease with a low 1%, for the sake of argument, mortality, a vaccine has to be very safe, the UK Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, texted to Hancock at the time. Just a few months later, in June 2020, Hancock got the encouraging results of a study that reported a dramatic fall in the virus reproduction rate. But the media were reporting on another controversial Cambridge University study, which claimed that transmission rates were high in some parts of the UK. The Menzies Research Centre writes that in an exchange of messages with the government's chief scientific advisor, Hancock cites the positive study, but continues, just done a presser where the media interest is only in the gloomy Cambridge study. But if we want people to behave themselves, maybe that's no bad thing. The advisor replies, agree, suck up their miserable interpretation and over-deliver. The authors note that Victorians could have hoped for a leader with greater substance than Andrews, someone more able to distinguish between policies that serve the interests of Victorians from those that serve to bolster brand Dan. Correspondence between the Premier's department and a research company, reported by The Australian, revealed that Andrews' personal approval rating became a prime metric for measuring success. Joining me in the studio is former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman and Freya Leach from the Menzies Research Centre in Sydney. Freya, all this fallout and clear indication, I guess, that we were badly led. Do you think we'll ever see a proper inquiry and some justice?
I honestly don't know. And I think there are so many flow-on impacts of COVID and particularly the lockdowns that we're only just seeing play out now. Declining school attendance rates, lower academic standards, the mental health impact this has had on young people. Not to mention the ongoing economic productivity slowdown we've had. So I just think it's something that has to be fully investigated, and the flow-on impacts of COVID is still being felt.
We also need to get some rules in place. I mean, never mind having an inquiry to sort of point blame, but we've also got to get some rules in place to make sure that we never let this happen again, right?
Well, I think a big challenge during COVID, and I've spoken to a number of people who were in Scott Morrison's office at the time, and a big challenge was the messages they were getting from the health bureaucrats were contradictory, inconsistent, and incomplete. So no one really knew what they were doing. And then the state premiers saw this as a great opportunity to have their 15 minutes of fame and exploited it for their own political game.
Yeah. Campbell, you and I have spoken about this many times over the years, but it just was a complete disaster in terms of crisis management. I mean, there was no leadership being shown in a sense of I'm taking advice from everybody around the table from different disciplines. It was just I'm handing over and surrendering and abdicating power to the chief health officers.
They completely lost their minds. I'm talking about the political leaders, and abrogated their responsibilities. You know, you have to in high political office take advice from a variety of people, and then you've got to make your own call. You know, during disasters in Queensland when I was Premier, I literally had to sort of basically stop the whole disaster management meeting and saying, you're telling me there's people on rooftops in Bundaberg, North Bundaberg, surrounded by floodwaters. You're telling me you're going to evacuate them by helicopter. How many helicopters have you got? I hope this makes sense, because they didn't have enough helicopters. You know, and people would have died in the 2013 Bundaberg floods because the bureaucrats and the supposed experts didn't do their job properly. Being a senior politician, running a cabinet, meeting, it's about asking the hard questions. Okay, it is about and it's about that's how you get the best out of your advisors. Scott Morrison never did it. That's when he lost me. The state premiers never did it. Perhaps they really enjoyed it. I think as Freya was alluding to it, but also then the state oppositions, they just fold up like wet paper bags. So I am scarred by that time.
Are you concerned now, 5 years on, that we haven't got anything?
No, we haven't got anything. And there's been a
inquiry.
conspiracy. There's been a conspiracy across the political spectrum to just nothing to see here. Let's move on. There's been a conspiracy amongst the Fourth Estate. Not a deliberate conspiracy, but it's a conspiracy of silence. It's like they're all embarrassed that they so comprehensively let us down. They don't want to go there because the media are culpable, just as much as the bureaucracy are in the states and in the federal parliament, federal government, and the political leadership everywhere. Yeah. It's just they don't want to do this. I think
it seemed that younger Australians sort of seem to want to kind of support lockdowns a bit. I mean, are you finding younger, particularly women, are concerned about things like this potential fertility risk link to the vaccine, things like that? Are people talking about this stuff at all in your age group and demographics?
Not really. I think there is a general desire to kind of, as Campbell said, just move on. I was in year 12 in 2020 during the first set of lockdowns, and it was massively disruptive. But there is this innate human desire for security, even if that overrides your freedom. And so I think just the nature of the uncertainty and the genuine fear that gripped a lot of people, especially in that first year of the pandemic, whether that was whipped up by the media or totally justified, I don't know. Well, I think we know a lot of it wasn't justified. But I think most people just kind of want to move on.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can't move on because we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, I guess. We'll be back in just a moment on the other side. The other side doesn't get more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money to bring you news from a centre-right perspective like the ABC does to bring you news from a left-wing perspective. In fact, we don't get a red cent from the government. We need voluntary donors and supporters like you to keep going and growing. And we hate asking for charity, so we've done a deal with what we think is the world's best VPN, virtual private network service. It'll keep you and your family truly safe without slowing down your internet speeds, and you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. And you can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and get more info. That's piavpn.com/otherside. Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Centre in Sydney wrote an interesting op-ed opinion piece for The Australian this week, in which he explains that the AEC took more than 150,000 people off the electoral roll last year because they had passed away. And he notes that the sad truth for the Liberal and National parties and all other minor centre-right parties is that most of those are probably Conservative. Nick writes that in 2019, 1.65 million voters put Liberal or LNP candidates first in inner metropolitan seats. This time, 1.23 million did so, a loss of more than a quarter. Add in losses outside the metropolitan seats, and the number is over 1 million that have walked away from our Conservative parties. Nick notes that Labor is no more or less popular now than it was when Bill Shorten lost. Back then, political commentators said Shorten's 34.7% of the primary vote was a disaster, whereas the same result this time round, Labor got 34.6 this time, is hailed as a triumph. Labor didn't win because people flocked to them, enthralled by Albanese's brilliance and charm. Nick, like many other commentators on the right, says the unmistakable conclusion is that it was a gift from the Liberal Party which forfeited the right to govern because it failed to inspire voters. To win over new voters, it'll have to improve its appeal to younger generations, women and immigrants. Every incoming coalition leader has been acutely aware of this challenge since the Howard era, yet none have managed to rise. That's Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Centre, and Freya Leach is the Director of the Centre for Youth Policy at the Menzies Research Centre. She's young, she's female, she's also the President of the University of Sydney Conservative Club and a former Liberal Party candidate for the New South Wales election. Freya, thanks for joining us once again. Politics is downstream from culture. You're in the thick of the culture wars, I guess. How can the Liberals and Nationals appeal to younger people, women and immigrants, as Nick says, without getting lost in the left-wing hell of identity politics and betraying the core values of individualism and liberty?
Well, I think we have to start by actually articulating what our values are. I mean, there is this tendency in the Liberal Party to kind of trade off the legacy of Howard and Costello and even Menzies to an extent. But the reality is I was barely born during the Howard Costello years. A lot of migrants weren't in the country. And we can't, 25 years later, keep claiming we're the better economic managers, we're the party for small business, we're the party for lower taxes, for less debt, if our record does not stack up to that. And people simply just don't know what we stand for. And in the absence of a positive narrative being put forward, Labor is then able to launch all the scare campaigns they want. And that's what they've done. So I think we really have to get back to basics, articulating from a philosophical level what the Liberal Party stands for and why it's actually good. Engage in the battle of ideas. That's what Menzies did when he was establishing the Liberal Party, his Forgotten People broadcasts. They laid out a vision for Australia. They diagnosed the problems of the day, and he laid out a really clear philosophical understanding of the country and where we should be going. And that's what we have to get back to. Enough of the Band-Aid solutions, the handouts 3 weeks before elections. We have to get back to our values, which are rooted in our philosophy. And then we have to prosecute the argument as to why they are actually the best for Australia.
I mean, you're in the thick of it, really. I mean, you're in at the university. Younger Australians are very left-wing. And as Nick points out, the older Conservative Australians are dying out. What hope is there, do you think, of being able to convert the thinking of younger Australians who do seem to sing this one core? I mean, young people have always been traditionally more left-wing. I was more left-wing when I was younger, but it doesn't seem to be changing with particularly the millennials up to 40. I mean, what's the sense? Is it what you're saying, that we need a philosophical core to get young people to really buy into these ideas more?
Well, ultimately, the truth is on our side. The left's ideas tend to unravel themselves and lead to disastrous outcomes wherever they're implemented. So we do know that sooner or later, people will start to see through a lot of their ideas and policies, and they'll wake up and realize Australia's worse off for it. That'll be our moment to capitalise on that. But hopefully it doesn't get to that point where we just have to wait for Labor's abject failure. But I mean, I do think there are some bright spots. So Gen Z men are actually more conservative than particularly millennials, but they're very conservative. And in fact, in the last election, a lot of them abandoned the Liberal Party to vote for One Nation and further right-wing parties. So I do think it is starting to shift. And we are the generation that has really lived through the left's full-on assault on our institutions, on our history, on our education systems. And we know the results. 36% of young Australians recorded having a mental disorder last year. We are economically probably the first generation to have lower living standards than our parents. We're inheriting a country with almost $1 trillion in debt. Our defence forces are wholly unprepared for a regional conflict. Like, our country is stalling, if not going backwards, and it certainly will be going backwards after another 3 years of Labor. So we just have to articulate what is actually going on, diagnose the problems, talk about our values, and then provide some actual solutions. I don't think this is irreversible. Young people carry Trump to power. Young people were more likely to support the Canadian Conservatives than were baby boomers. Young people in Europe are voting for right-of-centre parties in record numbers. There is a revival, a cultural revival of Western civilization happening among young people. But young people here in Australia simply haven't woken up yet.
Eddie, you're optimistic, though. You think is it ever going to be cool to be conservative here? Do you think is it starting to?
This is interesting because being left-wing, that was the counterculture against the establishment. But from about 2000 onwards, they became the establishment. So now, look, I do get abused a fair bit online, so I won't claim I'm the coolest person alive, but being conservative definitely is countercultural. So if that's what makes you cool, come join the conservative side.
There you go. You're the new rebels.
And I just totally agree with what Freya's just said. Yeah. But I'll just add this. Here's the problem at the moment. The problem is the Liberal Party politicians, and indeed the Nats as well, have not had the guts or the energy to get up and go and actually explain what the parties stand for to those young people. They actually haven't done it. Yeah. I mean, a very quick example, which is a very detailed example, but it's like diving into detail. But the workers on Snowy Hydro are being paid $200,000 and are striking to get even more money for their underground work. They are all on the top marginal rate. They're paying 50 cents in the dollar tax on every extra dollar they earn. And yet the Coalition never had the guts to explain that Albanese and Chalmers pulling away the the phase 3 tax cuts was actually going after them. Instead, they allowed the Labor Party to frame it as that's all about tax cuts for the rich. So they were never prepared to argue and explain, that actually there are blue collar workers in this country earning big bucks who needed tax relief. I've got young people who work in my company who are in the second highest tax bracket, and within a year or two, they will be on the highest tax bracket.
Yeah,
I tell them that they need tax relief.
Well, the number of young people who voted against their own interests in the past election, it's just extraordinary.
The Liberal, my thought, just on I totally agree with what Freya just said. My thought, the add-on to that is we need Liberal and National Party politicians to go out and have the guts to make the argument. But guess what? They're gutless and they're lazy.
We need more.
That's my thought. Yeah, they are gutless and they are lazy.
Yeah. And we're lacking...
And the election campaign showed that in general.
Yeah. We need more articulate people like Freya coming through the ranks.
Absolutely.
All right, Freya, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you spending the time with us today. Campbell, thank you very much once again for coming in. We'll see you again. I'd like to have you both back on the show as regularly as you'd like to come.
Freya might have had enough of me already.
Thank you so much, Freya. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Campbell.
Cheers.
Take care. All right, folks, that's it for The Other Side for yet another week. We will catch you next Friday night at 7 o'clock with episode 413. In the meantime, if you would like to jump onto our website, othersidetv.com.au, and support us for less than $5 a month or more, if you can help out, we'd really appreciate it. I'm Damien Curry. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damien Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.